Raggedy Ann. Raggedy Ann is a character created by American writer Johnny Gruelle 1880–1938 that appeared in a series of books he wrote and illustrated for young children. Raggedy Ann is a rag doll with red yarn for hair and a triangle nose. Gruelle received US Patent D47789 for his Raggedy Ann doll on September 7, 1915. The character was created in 1915 as a doll and was introduced to the public in the 1918 book Raggedy Ann Stories. When a doll was marketed with the book, the concept had great success. A sequel, Raggedy Andy Stories 1920, introduced the character of her brother, Raggedy Andy. Further characters such as Beloved Belindy, a black mammy doll, were featured as dolls and characters in books. Origins. The exact details of the origins of the Raggedy Ann doll and related stories, which were created by Johnny Gruelle, are not specifically known, although numerous myths and legends about the doll's origins have been widely repeated. Gruelle biographer and Raggedy Ann historian Patricia Hall notes that the dolls have found themselves at the center of several legend cycles, groups of stories that, while containing kernels of truth, are more myth than they are history. What makes this even more intriguing is that fact that Johnny Gruelle, either unwittingly or with the great sense of humor he was known for, initiated many of these legends, a number of which are continuously repeated as the factual history of Raggedy Ann and Andy. Hall further explains that according to an oft-repeated myth, Gruelle's daughter Marcella brought from her grandmother's attic a faceless cloth doll on which the artist drew a face, and that Gruelle suggested that Marcella's grandmother sew a shoe button for a missing eye. Hall says the date of this supposed occurrence is given as early as 1900 and as late as 1914, with the locale variously given as suburban Indianapolis, Indiana, downtown Cleveland, Ohio, or rural Connecticut. More likely, as Gruelle's wife, Myrtle, reported, it was her husband who retrieved a long-forgotten, homemade rag doll from the attic of his parents' Indianapolis home sometime around the turn of the 20th century before the couple's daughter was born. Although the incident is unconfirmed, Myrtle Gruelle recalled, while he was rummaging around for it, he found an old rag doll his mother had made for his sister. He said then that the doll would make a good story. Myrtle Gruelle also indicated that her husband kept the doll in his mind until we had Marcella. He remembered it when he saw her play with dolls. He wrote the stories around some of the things she did. He used to get ideas from watching her. Additionally, Gruelle did not create Raggedy Ann as a tribute to his daughter following her death at 13 from an infected vaccination. Note: it has never been confirmed that a vaccination administered to Marcella was infected, nor if the vaccination caused her death directly or instead impacted negatively on an underlying heart condition. Hall notes Gruelle's May 28, 1915, US Patent D47789 application for the design of the prototype that became the Raggedy Ann doll was already in progress around the time that Marcella fell ill, and the artist received final approval by the U.S. Patent Office on September 7, 1915, the same month as Marcella's death. Nonetheless, the anti-vaccination movement adopted Raggedy Ann as a symbol, though Marcella died from an infected vaccination, not from the side effects of the vaccination itself. Naming Raggedy Ann. On June 17, 1915, shortly after submitting his patent application for the doll's design, Johnny Gruelle applied for a registered trademark for the Raggedy Ann name, which he created by combining words from two of James Whitcomb Riley poems, The Raggedy Man and Little Orphant Annie. Riley was a well-known Hoosier poet and a Gruelle family friend and neighbor from the years when they resided in Indianapolis. The U.S. Patent Office registered Gruelle's trademark application 107,328 for the Raggedy Ann name on November 23, 1915. Early books and doll design. Raggedy Ann Stories 1918, written and illustrated by Johnny Gruelle and published by the P.F. Volland Company, was the first in a series of books about his cloth doll character and her friends. The book's first edition also included Gruelle's own version of the doll's origins and the related stories. 2 years after the publication of the first Raggedy Ann book, although the female members of Gruelle's family may have made a small number of initial versions of the Raggedy Ann doll in Norwalk, Connecticut, to help market the related books, Gruelle soon established a merchandising agreement with P.F. Volland Company, his primary publisher, to begin commercially manufacturing, selling, and promoting a mass-produced version of the doll. In addition to his patent application US Patent D47789 in 1915 for the design of what became the Raggedy Ann doll, Gruelle patented his design US Patent D56149 for a generic male doll in 1920. A short time after its literary debut in 1920, Raggedy Andy appeared as a commercially made doll marketed by Volland. Following the success of the first Raggedy Ann book, in addition to books, Gruelle also wrote lyrics for musical compositions that were published as sheet music and songbooks for children. These works included Raggedy Ann's Sunny Songs 1930, which was set to music by former U.S. Treasury Secretary William H. Wooden. In his later years, Gruelle collaborated with his son, Worth, on illustrations for some of his later books such as Raggedy Ann and the Golden Meadow 1935, and on a series of illustrated Raggedy Ann proverbs that were syndicated in newspapers. By 1938, the year that Johnny Gruelle died, his first Raggedy Ann book had sold more than 3 million copies. Raggedy Ann doll sales were also growing. The P.F. Volland Company's initial order of 24 dozen dolls from the non-breakable toy company, the doll's early manufacturer, increased to about 3,200 dolls within the first 8 months of production. With its growing popularity, Gruelle gave Volland the exclusive rights to manufacture and sell the dolls as long as it remained the exclusive publisher of his books. Legal challenges. In 1935, Gruelle brought suit against Molly Goldman Gruelle vs. Goldman after her company, Molly E.'s Doll Outfitters, continued to manufacture unauthorized version of the Raggedy Ann and Andy dolls. Goldman's attorney argued that Gruelle's design patent for Raggedy Ann had expired in 1929, and Gruelle did not apply for a design patent or a trademark for a doll specifically named Raggedy Andy. The U.S. Patent Office registered Goldman's application for a trademark for her Raggedy Ann and Raggedy Andy dolls in 1935. Her patent application U.S. Patent D96382 for her Raggedy Andy design was granted on May 7, 1935. Goldman's versions of Raggedy Ann and Raggedy Andy closely resembled the Gruelle-designed rag dolls, which he had authorized the Exposition Doll and Toy Manufacturing Company to manufacture. Gruelle brought suit against Goldman for trademark infringement in October 1936, but the case was dismissed. He won the lawsuit on appeal in 1937. In the appellate court's option handed down on December 23, 1937, Goldman's company, Molly E.'s Doll Outfitters, could not legally manufacture dolls named Raggedy Ann and Raggedy Andy. Goldman was ordered to provide restitution to Gruelle. Following Gruelle's death in 1938, Myrtle Swan Gruelle, his widow, took further legal action to secure the rights to his works, trademarks, and patents, including those relating to Raggedy Ann and Andy. She also continued to promote Raggedy Ann and Andy, among Gruelle's other literary characters through the Johnny Gruelle Company, which also published the author's books for several years. P. F. Volland, his primary publisher, discontinued its book publishing business during the Great Depression. Legacy. By the end of the 1940s, sales of Raggedy and related books exceeded 7 million copies. The Indianapolis-based Bobbs Merrill Company became the authorized publisher and licensor for Raggedy and related literary works in 1962, and the Knickerbocker Toy Company began manufacturing the Raggedy Ann and Andy dolls in the early 1960s. Simon & Schuster and Hasbro claim ownership of the trademarks to the Raggedy Ann and Raggedy Ann and Andy names. The original US Patent D47789 for the 1915 doll design, as well as the Raggedy Ann Stories 1918 and Raggedy Andy Stories 1920 books, are in the public domain, their copyrights having expired. The Raggedy Ann and Raggedy Andy dolls and their related memorabilia have become sought-after collectors' items. In addition to the dolls and books, other related items continue to be produced, including adaptations of the stories into comic books, audio recordings, animated films, and television and theatrical productions. Honors and tributes. The Raggedy Ann doll was inducted into the National Toy Hall of Fame in Rochester, New York, on March 27, 2002. Raggedy Andy was inducted 5 years later, on November 8, 2007. Related books. Johnny Gruelle, Raggedy Ann's creator, authored and or illustrated dozens of related works. Many other books were released and, in some cases, credited to Gruelle after his death in 1938. In addition, numerous works have been written and or illustrated by others such as Ethel Hayes, who illustrated most of the Saalfeld Publishing Company's Raggedy and related stories published from 1944. Written and illustrated by Johnny Gruelle. Written by Johnny Gruelle, illustrated by others. Adaptations attributed to Gruelle or based on his works. Written by others, illustrated by Gruelle and or others. Raggedy Ann and Andy's Grow and Learn Library. A collection of 20 books published by Lynx, with each story containing a lesson, such as maintaining friendship, when someone moves away or why parents must go to work. Raggedy Ann and Andy live in Marcella's playroom with many other toys such as Babette the French doll, Raggedy Dog, the camel with the wrinkled knees, Sunny Bunny, Bubbles the clown, Tim the toy soldier, and more. Other adaptations. Many subsequent adaptations of the Raggedy Ann and Andy books have been published, in addition to the characters appearing in other media formats. Animated feature films and shorts. Fleischer Studios / Famous Studios Shorts. Raggedy Ann and Raggedy Andy 1941. Suddenly It's Spring 1944. The Enchanted Square 1947. Raggedy Ann and Andy, A Musical Adventure 1977. Snowden, Raggedy Ann and Andy's Adventure 1998. Theater and Stage. Raggedy Ann and Andy 1981. Raggedy Ann, The Musical Adventure 1986. Television. Raggedy Ann and Andy in the Great Santa Claus Caper 1978. Raggedy Ann and Andy and the Pumpkin Who Couldn't Smile 1979. The Adventures of Raggedy Ann and Andy 1988-1990. Raggedy Ann and Andy and the Camel with the Wrinkled Knees. Audio recordings. Comic books. Doll manufacturers. P.F. Volland Company 1920-1934. Beers, Keelier, and Bowman, early manufacturer of Raggedy Andy dolls. Exposition Doll and Toy Company 1935, mid-1935. Molly E's Doll Outfitters Without Permission 1935–1937. Georgine Novelties 1938–1962. Knickerbocker Toy Company 1963–1982. Applause Toy Company / Russberry 1983–2011. Hasbro / Playskool 1983 present master license. Aurora World Inc. 2012 present exclusive plush doll license. Doll production. Although the female members of Gruelle's family may have originally handmade a few of the versions of the Raggedy Ann doll in Norwalk, Connecticut, to help market the related books, Gruelle soon established a merchandising agreement with P.F. Volland Company, the primary publisher of his books, to manufacture. Early Raggedy Ann and Andy dolls were manufactured by different companies and not produced as matched sets. Between 1918 and 1926, the non-breakable toy company of Muskegon, Michigan made more than 75,000 dolls for Volland. By the late 1920s, Volland's orders for Raggedy Ann dolls from its manufacturer had reached 4,000 per month. When Volland ceased operations during the Great Depression, it had already sold more than 150,000 dolls and nearly 2 million Raggedy Ann books. In 1935, Gruelle granted permission to the Exposition Doll and Toy Manufacturing Company to manufacture and sell authorized versions of the Raggedy Ann and Andy dolls. From 1935 until 1937, Molly E's Doll Outfitters manufactured and sold unauthorized versions of the Raggedy Ann and Andy dolls until a legal decision handed down in Gruelle v. Molly Goldman prohibited Molly E's dolls from further manufacturing and sales of the dolls. Sewing patterns for homemade dolls. 2015 saw another Simplicity pattern number 8043 for 3 different sized dolls of both Raggedy Ann and Raggedy Andy. 15, 26 and 36 are available. This pattern was called the classic Raggedy Ann and Andy and copywritten by Simon and Schuster. In popular culture, a Raggedy Ann balloon debuted at the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade in 1984, flying for 2 years. The allegedly cursed Annabelle doll is a Raggedy Ann doll living in Ed and Lorraine Warren's house in Monroe, Connecticut. Public collections. Gruelle's hometown of Arcola, Illinois, is the former home of the annual Raggedy Ann and Andy Festival and the Raggedy Ann and Andy Museum. The museum was closed and the festival discontinued in 2009. Some of the museum's contents were donated to Strong National Museum of Play. Other aspects of the collection were moved to the Rockholm Gardens theme park in Arcola.